Hello and welcome to the Lobster Pot. Actually, is it the Lobster Pot podcast or is it not? Because actually what we're doing is we're doing the seminars that we couldn't do at Product Earth Day 2 because it got cancelled. But, you know, still want everyone to have an opportunity to do their seminars and do their bit. So here we are. And we have right now, we have the lovely Berta. How you doing, Berta? Great friend of the show. How you doing?
Hi, Dave. I am doing great. Thank you so much for having me on. I look forward to actually being able to do this presentation for everyone.
Excellent. Yeah. Now you're with FVIDA. Tell us a little bit about FVIDA.
So FVIDA is a FVIDA is a patient educational platform where we advocate plant medicine. I share a lot about my experience as a patient, but the key thing that I like to focus on is a holistic healthcare approach. One of the things that is actually just lacking in society now is a holistic approach. Whether it's the NHS or whether it's the cannabis industry, we have become accustomed to just prescribing more medication rather than looking at what kind of diet is the person having. Are they exercising? Are they sleeping? All these different factors contribute to your health and well-being. So I want to bring awareness to that. On our educational platform, we've got various different materials and resources people can use.
Very cool. Now, title of your seminar, it's about substance misuse. Is that right?
Yes, it is. Substance misuse is my favorite topic, so I'm very, very excited to talk about this. I know a lot of people in the industry don't like to hear the word substance misuse because it's a medication, and I understand that, but I always advocate that we still need to be aware and cautious and protect ourselves, which is why I really want to talk about substance misuse and identifying signs of dependence.
Excellent. Well, without further ado, I'll let you take it away and I'll keep stum and over to you.
So as I mentioned, I am going to be talking about substance misuse and identifying the signs of dependence. So before we get into the exciting stuff, let's go over a little bit of the boring stuff. Let me do a bit of a formal introduction. So my name is Berta Kaguako, and I am a health and social care consultant in the private sector, and also sit as a panel member for school appeals in both primary and secondary schools. My background is in mental health, substance misuse, children and family services, and both therapeutically and in a senior management capacity. So I initially started my career in children's psychotherapy, where I specialized in trauma and abuse before moving on to working with substance misuse with youths and adults. And I currently work as a substance misuse and mental health consultant for a family assessment center where we assess parenting capacity for family court. I am also the founder of FVIDA, like I mentioned before, a patient educational platform around plant-based medicines, and we also aim to bring representation for ethnic minorities and women's health in the cannabis space. So, on to the exciting stuff. By all means, Dave, stop me at any point if you want to ask a few questions, because once I get in the zone, I can get a bit carried away. So, what is substance misuse, right? So I'm actually going to go over the formal definition of substance misuse. So this is defined as the continued misuse of any mind-altering substance that severely affects a person's physical and mental health, social situation, and responsibilities. It's seen as a brain disorder because it involves functional changes to the brain circuits, because it releases really high doses of serotonin, dopamine, adrenaline, just to name a few. And a lot of people aren't really aware of this, because whenever we say substance misuse, people always think about illicit or recreational use, the sort of drugs that you get in the black market. But what people also forget is that you can misuse your medication, and you can also misuse over-the-counter medication, which I know sounds weird, but I once had somebody that was addicted to paracetamol. It can happen. So substance misuse applies to the use of any illicit substances or medication outside of the recommended dosage. So one of the things that people need to remember is if you are taking somebody else's medication, which is actually more common than people realize, this is also considered misuse because that medication wasn't for you. So if you're using someone else's medication and it's working for you, then that means that there is a need for it. So please, please, please go and speak to your GP so that they can support you to get a proper prescription and get some clinical oversight to actually help you, deal with whatever issue you have. And I always like to leave people with this one very important reflection, right? Nobody at the age of 13, 14 was lying in bed at night going, I cannot wait to be an adult so that I can start misusing substances. That's not a reality for anybody. At the end of the day, people end up using due to various different life circumstances, and the aim is to just feel better, not to abuse drugs. So it's really important that we remember this, and that we don't judge people based on their substance misuse. So now that we got all that out of the way, Dave, do you have any questions? Was that all clear?
No, that's great. I think, I'll come to some questions at the end. I'm just making a few notes, but there's a few points here that, interesting. But yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So, what substances can be misused? There is a lot of different substances that can be misused, as you can see here. The ones that I always like to bring attention to is, I think I mentioned it before, prescribed and over-the-counter medications can be misused, and hand sanitizer is much more common than people realize. It's hand sanitizer is high in alcohol, and therefore people who are alcohol dependent would use hand sanitizer if they can't afford to buy any alcohol, as it helps with their withdrawal symptoms. On that note, it's really important to reflect that cannabis is the most misused substance in the globe, and we are referring to adult use here. And so actually, Dave, I'm going to ask you, which do you think is the worst drug?
Oh, in terms of misuse, I think probably I'm gonna say alcohol.
Yep, you're spot on. A lot of people aren't aware of this, right? But if you look at the ONS statistics, right? More people die of alcohol misuse than heroin and cocaine combined. I apologize, I'm having the brain fog today. Yeah, I can't even speak properly. But yes, then heroin and cocaine combined. Yeah, so that's a really, really scary number, especially considering alcohol is legal. Yeah, I always like to emphasize that point. So moving on, why might people misuse substances? Yeah, so it's fun, If it wasn't fun, nobody would misuse it. Some people are self-medicating. They're either self-medicating for mental health or a physical health concern. For some people, it's learned behavior. They grew up in an environment where substance misuse has been normalized. There's peer pressure, there's curiosity, there's escapism. People do find it, people prefer to misuse substances as a coping mechanism. And I always say to that, when it comes to escapism, I'm always like, this, I feel, is a shortcut, because I will always advocate for putting the work in for your well-being. I understand that there are times where you would struggle to put that work in, and so you do need medication to help you or a substance to help you. But we'll come back to that point when we explore dependence. But there are a variety of other reasons why people use it. The main thing that I would like to really highlight is a lot of people aren't aware that it's very, very common for people to misuse substances in case of modern slavery and trafficking as a... Oh God, I'm actually getting my words all confused over here. I apologize. Give me 2 seconds to just wrap my brain around.
No worries.
Okay, so one of the things I really like to hone in on is the forced misuse, because this is actually something that is very concerning in our society today, and a lot of people aren't aware that this is very, very common, especially in cases of modern slavery, trafficking, and it's also a very, very common form of domestic abuse. So what are the different types of misuse? just to clarify, there are a variety of different types of misuse, but we generally tend to categorize it in these 5 stages. So you have people who are just experimenting. Generally with those people, they would try it one time and that's it. They're like, didn't really like it, or they did like it, but they didn't really want to try it again, and that's it. And then you have people who tried it and then are like, "Ooh, I like this," and start developing a regular sort of habitual use. Usually when it's habitual use, it's usually during like evenings and weekends, usually associated with partying. And then you slowly start to creep up into risky use. And that is where the person is slowly using it more and more regularly, probably started increasing it to using it during the day also. And then you have dependence. And this is basically where a person has developed a psychological or a physical dependency. And then you have what I like to call full-blown addiction. And that is where you have completely out of control use to the point where your substances are impacting every area of your life and you cannot control it. So, what is dependence? Dependence is when a person has become physically or psychologically reliant on a substance and think that they actually need the substance in order to function. Um, so there are 2 types of dependence. There is physical dependence and then there's psychological dependence. Right. So if we look at physical dependence, what you will see is the person has developed a physical dependency. What that means is that when the person stops taking this substance, they start to experience withdrawal symptoms. A lot of these are physical withdrawal symptoms. And some of these can include sweats, shakes, tremors. Most common is nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. Some people, depending on the substance, can have hallucinations, paranoia, confusion, disorientation. There is a variety of different symptoms that people will experience when they are withdrawing. And again, depending on the substance, they can experience it with quite severe intensity. One of the main things that I always like to highlight is just going back to alcohol again, right? Again, I don't know why this drug is legal, because alcohol is one of the very few drugs whose withdrawal symptoms can actually kill you. So they're fatal because you can have a seizure or a heart attack and die. Again, it's legal, but whatever. So psychological dependence. So I like to describe this as a belief system. It's very mental, where you think that without this medication, you're not going to be okay. You're not going to be functional. And as a result, the withdrawal symptoms when it comes to psychological dependence are a lot more emotive. Like, so if you look at it, you have like the anxiety, the insomnia, mood swings, restlessness, food cravings. Like, you don't necessarily experience as much physical symptoms. So just to be very, very clear for both symptoms that I've listed out, these are just some of the symptoms, usually the most common ones, but if you go online, you'll definitely be able to find a lot more symptoms. There are links on Efrida webpage. So, although this is not really associated with dependence, I always like to really highlight this point because in a way, to me, it is associated with dependence. So when someone is misusing a substance, and I really like to take opiates as an example, right? Because opiates releases it releases chemicals like dopamine into your bloodstream. And with dopamine, right? So dopamine impacts the brain's reward center, right? Which means then you get intense feelings of pleasure and you're like, yes, I love this. Like, again, hence why people like taking drugs, because you're supposed to feel amazing, right? And when you look at opiates, right, and we look at the chemical response in the body, your body naturally produces these chemicals, and then when you start introducing it externally, what happens is your body actually stops producing these chemicals because it doesn't need to. It's getting it 100 times fold, right? So the issue with that is it's grand when you're misusing your substances because you will still have these hormones in you. But when you stop, then your body actually needs the substance now because it's lacking in these hormones, because your body can't just naturally start producing it all over again. It shut that system down completely, which is why you need to actually start figuring out a way to start jump starting that process, right? And one of the ways that you can do this, right, as I always say to people, engage in lots of different activities, do lots of different hobbies, exercise, do something creative, because when you're doing this, you are using the right side of the brain. And that is the creative side of the mind, which stimulates the reward system in the brain. So it releases these chemicals then naturally for you. So the more exercise or hobbies that you do, the more of these chemicals you start releasing naturally for yourself. So when we are supporting people with substance misuse, we never ever tell them to stop using the substance. They have to come down off the substance while we increase their natural production. And so it should work that way until they stop, and then their body naturally produces these hormones, because without it, they're going to not only feel terrible, because if you look at dopamine deficiency, actually it's on my page here. If you look at dopamine deficiency, you will see, you know, the symptoms are muscle cramps, digestion issues, you're exhausted, your mood swings, insomnia, cognitive processing issues, you know, you're feeling terrible, basically. So we don't want someone to feel that terrible. We want to be supporting people. So there is a method in which you do this as well. Because if you just abruptly stop taking it, yeah, you're left feeling miserable. So what do you think are early signs of dependence? So whenever I talk to people about dependence, right, what I always say to people it's the stuff that you need to look out for. And we're going to go over that now. So are you building a tolerance to the medication? Basically, a tolerance is where you have used the medication to a point where the effective dose no longer works for you, and therefore you need to increase your dosage in order to get that same effect. Are you experiencing withdrawal symptoms like we mentioned earlier? Do you spend a great deal of time thinking about substances and how to obtain it? Have you stopped doing enjoyable activities because of your substance use? Have you stopped going to work? What does your substance use pattern look like? So if you remember the categories, where do you fit in with that? Are you able to pay your vital bills? One of the things that I always say to any patients that I work with is the biggest indicator for me that there is a concern here with their use is when they have stopped paying rent, bills, shopping, because they would rather use that money for their to purchase substances. Do you experience psychological withdrawal symptoms? Can you stop using if you wanted to? And are you in control, or do you feel compelled? If you answer yes to, do you know what? I'm going to go right ahead and say to at least 3 of these, then I think it's definitely time to start exploring your relationship with your substances. So the main thing I like people to take away is whenever you think of misusing, always think to yourself, is there something else I can do instead? Like to still get a bit of a dopamine release? Do I really need to use this substance? And I always like to give the example of myself. Like I use cannabis-based medical products, and there are times where I would get like really, really bad lower back pain, and I would go for my vape, and then I stop and think to myself, do I really need a vape, or can I put a heating patch on and stretch a little bit and see if that helps first? And you know what? It's 50-50. Sometimes that actually does help. I didn't need to take my medication at that time. And then other times it doesn't help. And then I'm like, okay, well, I've tried other stuff. Now I need to take my medication. It's just, well, using your medication responsibly, or sorry, substances responsibly, I guess, and exploring different approaches. And I always like to go over the scary statistics now as well. So Unfortunately, when it comes to substance misuse, 1 in 3 users die, and this is generally as a result of an overdose. 1 in 3 users end up in a revolving door and eventually die earlier than the average life expectancy. And then 1 in 3 users are actually able to overcome their substance misuse and have a complete turnaround and reintegrate back into society. Um, so what I always say to people, let's not be another statistic. Let's really explore our relationship with substances. And if you feel that, okay, maybe you're a little bit concerned, there are a variety of services that you can get support from. So don't worry, it is not the end of the world. You can make positive changes for your future. And also always remember to speak to your GP, as they are your primary carer and they can also link you into relevant services in your vicinity. On our website, we have got some more information on substance misuse, how to access services, and I just want to leave everybody with one quote. To bring about change, you must not be afraid to take the first step. We will fail when we fail to try. I hope that. Yeah, so Rosa Parks. Right. Peace.
Very good. No, that's wow. There's some really good stuff there, Berta. Thank you so much. No, I mean, it's really interesting. Yeah.
Sorry.
Not presenting. That's
Yeah,
all right.
sorry. Okay, yeah, sorry.
There's a few things, a couple of questions I have for you. And so again, you talked more broadly about the idea of misuse, but what do you see as the difference between misuse and abuse? And why did you kind of choose to use that term? What do you see the differences? Or is there a difference?
So there is no difference. It used to be called substance abuse. However, because for political reasons, they changed the name from substance misuse to substance abuse to substance misuse. So that's more of a political thing.
Okay, no, just
They both mean the same thing, yeah.
Yeah, no. Again and again, you sort of use the example of alcohol and talking about it's not just a kind of legal thing, because I think a lot of people, I mean, certainly, again, my sort of own perception is if you're taking something that is illegal, that feels like it's actually more of a kind of misuse rather than something legal, which is just, and that feels to me like that's a dichotomy that most people wouldn't necessarily see the distinction between.
Do you know what? That is such a really good point, right? Because we all look at illicit substances, right? And we're like, oh, a person is using this, and oh my God, and that drug must be so dangerous. And, this drug must be so fatal. Meanwhile, the worst drug is alcohol, and it's legal. So it's interesting that people don't have that same relationship when it comes to alcohol. Like I think I've mentioned to you before in the past, I'm not a heavy drinker and I'm Irish, right? So whenever I go home to Ireland or I'm with my Irish friends, I have people always laughing at me and they're like, Berta, give back your Irish passport. Like, how can you say you're Irish and you can't drink? Yeah. And we can say this about alcohol, but God forbid I tell somebody I'm on a cannabis prescription and all of a sudden it's, this is a bad drug. Like,
yeah, no. It's an interesting one, again, which kind of plays into this idea of cannabis misuse, or the idea that, if people, we talk about, if medical cannabis is, people who get stoned, are they essentially misusing their cannabis prescription? Or again, if we look at it in the context of recreational use, is that okay? Do you see what I mean? Again,
yeah.
It's kind of reconciling those. I don't think there's an easy answer here, but again, it just seems like...
Oh, sorry.
No. Please. Yeah, please.
The thing is, right, there is no easy answer, but how I always like to look at it is, are you trying to manage a symptom? Because when you're using cannabis, whether it's recreational, whether it's medically, and when I say recreational, we are talking about adult use here. So let me change the term to adult use, right? So when it's adult use, right? Sorry, I have my substance misuse cap on. Put the other cap on. When we talk about adult use, right? A lot of people often say to me, "Oh, well, I'm effectively managing my symptoms." And when I ask them, "Okay, well, what symptoms are you managing at the time?" The answer is usually boredom. The answer is boredom, but I'm sorry, but you're misusing. From a legal perspective, if you look at the definition, you are misusing it. Yeah, the same way, but somebody who is drinking alcohol, people don't realize this as well. Even though it's legal, you are still misusing it. It's legal, but it's still misuse of substance, right? So I think that's why people get very frustrated. It's because of the legal terminologies behind a lot of things. And they're like, that's not appropriate. And we're like, yeah, it's outdated. This is what we advocate for. But at the end of the day, I always say, if you are not managing a symptom at that time, then technically you're just misusing, because you don't actually need the medication at that time, do you?
No, exactly.
Yeah.
It's no, but again, I think a lot of these things, again, there's no easy answer. But again, it's like people can drink in moderation. Does that count as misuse? Well, all alcohol, it doesn't have a kind of medicinal effects in the same way that medication does. So all consumption is, by that token, misuse, but it's legal. But you see what I mean? But again, don't, in the same way, I mean, people will, I guess cannabis is one of those substances where it's like, okay, it's more socially acceptable, even though it's illicit when you consume it recreationally, but you can have a little bit and that's fine. You can't really do that with like other medications like opiates or heroin, whatever. It's it's all or nothing, it feels like. There's no kind of,
and I think
it's moderately. I guess people do, but it just feels like it's a greater barrier to entry. It's just like, you don't just go from like drinking or smoking. It's, we're talking about injecting something essentially, and that feels like you don't kind of do that half-heartedly.
No, God, you made some really good points, right? For my ADHD brain gets really excited now, right? Let me calm myself down. So I find it very frustrating, I'm going to be honest, right? Because when you look at alcohol, like, I think anybody who knows me knows I'm not a huge fan of alcohol, but whatever. But when you look at alcohol, right, we all know the sole purpose of alcohol is for misuse. That is the sole purpose. There ain't no medicational benefits to alcohol, right? So the reason why people drink alcohol is to misuse. However, when you look at alcoholism or alcohol dependency, right? Why is it in society that when it comes to alcohol, there is a clear distinction between misuse and then treatment for alcohol dependence? However, when it comes to cannabis, right, it can be used. Again, when I say misuse, we're talking about legal terminologies, okay? People don't freak out. Legal terminologies. Right. So when we say then cannabis and we say misuse, right? Why can't we also have that similar association with it being medical as well? Because when people go in to get alcohol treatment, and we all know alcohol dependence exists. We all know it exists. People die from it more than any other condition in the world, but somehow we have just accepted that. And then when it comes to cannabis, no, but you misuse it. But alcohol doesn't even have medicinal benefits. Cannabis does. So why can't there be that clear division between, okay, we understand that people misuse it, but we also understand that this is an amazing medication, similar to how alcohol is, where people have just accepted that we misuse it, have accepted that people become dependent on it, and have accepted treatment. I would just love to see, okay, I'm going to give you a scenario, right? You will go, let's say you see your friend, and your friend had about 6 glasses of wine, right? Would you not say something to them? Would you not be like, I'm noticing you're drinking a bit too much, like, yeah, because you're identifying the signs of dependence. I would like exactly the same thing for cannabis, right? Is if you're going to be using recreationally and stuff like that, for people to be able to be like, I've noticed that you haven't had money lately to be able to pay your bills, but you've been smoking a lot lately. Like, to be able to just identify these signs, similar to how we would do it with alcohol, it's not that deep. I don't know why.
I guess it's doing it without the stigma attached to cannabis. I mean, it's kind of like, okay, you're drinking too much. You need to slow down. All right, you've had too many. We'll send you home now. Come on, let's get you in a taxi. Type thing. But it comes to cannabis, it's like, you're smoking cannabis. What are you, a junkie? It's the.
Yep. No, I fully agree. It's completely ridiculous. And and we recognize, because come on, we all recognize it's a psychoactive substance. We know it can be, it can be misused, and some people can develop a psychological dependence. So why not put that awareness out there? Why not start challenging these stigmas and start educating people on identifying these signs, similar to how you would with alcohol? I just don't understand why instead.
I guess that with something like cannabis, it's kind of like, you start from the point that it's negative. You start from that, oh, if you take cannabis, that is misuse, that is drug abuse, that is drug misuse. And then you have the opportunity, and that plays into the stigma that everybody wants to hear and that the cannabis industry doesn't want to hear. But actually, maybe that's a more effective way to get people to understand, yes, it can be misused, but look at the benefits, and it's about mindful consumption. So
thank you. Like, honestly, you hit the nail right on the head there. Like, that's perfect. Like, and this is exactly what Efida is trying to do.
This is it.
Is bring awareness to this. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
No, thank you. It's been education, and best of luck. And I know the Vida podcast is out there, so encourage everyone to take a look, and we'll speak to you soon, Berta. But thank you. And you finally got to the seminar, so real good.
I know, yay! I look forward to actually seeing everybody's talks. Or what is podcast? I guess now, yeah. I look forward to seeing everybody's podcast because it was a
seminar podcast. So no, sodcast. Though that doesn't work, does it? We won't call it that. Yeah,
sodcast.
We'll leave that there. But thank you.
Yeah, but I look forward because there was some amazing topics. So I'm like, yay! Can't wait, Dave. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. Cheers, Berta.
Cheers. Bye.